The late 1990s was a really interesting innovation period in the internet. At the time, consumer reviews felt like one of these types of innovations. We hadn't really seen them before. I don't think it was clear in the late 1990s where consumer review fit into the firmament of the internet. And if they were one of these crazy ideas that was going to fail, or if they were like the next big thing. Consumer reviews are a particularly interesting class of internet content because there's really no offline analogy to them. Back in the day, we used to have things like professional reviews that were published in newspapers or magazines. So we had really limited opportunities to hear from people who were just like us.
Back in the 90s, most of the people selling things were sort of niche merchants. So even Amazon was a bookseller. And you had to figure out, because you were going to give a credit card number to each one of these merchants online, is this merchant actually reputable? But as sites like Amazon became bigger and started selling things beyond books, people ended up settling upon a couple of sites that they were comfortable with and then buying all manner of products. And so the question is are the products worthwhile, even if I trust the merchant? And for that, people introduced reviews. Amazon started off actually hiring book reviewers. But as they expanded, they got rid of those and opened it up to the public. During the 1990s, and Section 230 of the Communication Decency Act, I think was really important because it meant that the platforms weren't responsible for the content that the users posted. The primary reason why we even saw it develop is because of Section 230. The timing wasn't accidental between Section 230 being placed on the books and then a service like Amazon experimenting with consumer reviews and then standalone services like Opinions coming to the fore. And the reason is that consumer reviews are just a giant liability trap. No business was willing to experiment with giving amateurs the power to criticize businesses unless they could avoid liability for it. So Section 230 is the reason why we have consumer reviews. We wouldn't have them without it. Consumer reviews really started with Amazon as the most visible service that offered reviews. And they would have reviews of books that they were offering in their catalog by individual consumers. But a few things. One is that they didn't cover the widest range of goods and services. They were focused on only what they carried. And two, they were a retailer. So you always question, were they showcasing the reviews because these were the true, honest perspectives of the consumers, or were they the reviews that were cherry-picked in order to help move the most product or the most profitable product? Everyone at some point decided they needed to start doing online reviews or they would be left behind, because if I can shop at Amazon and see 100 reviews of a product and go somewhere else and they don't have any reviews, I'm going to go to Amazon first and then probably buy things there, even if I do a little bit of comparison shopping. So even 10 years ago, we realized that reviews were really important. It could allow you to fill more seats in your restaurant and sell more products and sell them for a little bit higher. And now in a world where everyone expects everything to be reviewed and rated and ranked, if you weren't to do it, you would really be left behind.
Those reviews matter. These businesses live and die by their reviews. It's that important to them.
If you don't have reviews, you basically fail. So it has opened up this Pandora's box where even legitimate businesses that have never bought fake reviews in the past now have to look at very aggressive strategies to gain reviews to actually compete with people that are entering their categories.
But when you think about, 90s and the new millennium, we now enable fakery at scale.
The scope of the problem is just massive, and probably no other form of fraud affects more people than online review fraud. And it's amazing the types of professions that are involved in this fraud. Doctors, lawyers, contractors, piano teachers, childcare centers, you name it.
The first category are the bot-generated reviews. So this is basically where a computer program spits out fake reviews based off some seed text. And fake review farms cater to this, and they can offer this kind of service. It's very, very cheap to just generate constant text all the time. And then we have the second category of fake reviews, and these are human-generated fake reviews. And those are the more insidious and much more hard to detect reviews, because now you actually have to look at bias. You have to look at if there's been some kind of incentive provided to these reviewers. And those reviewers actually also congregate in different platforms like Facebook groups, Telegram groups, WhatsApp groups, even Twitter. And this is a very modern element for fake reviews. It is a bit of a cat and mouse game. And that's very, very interesting because it's like a race between the platforms and the fraudsters.
If I can see this fraud, a lone citizen investigator can ferret out a network of over 1,200 businesses getting fake Google reviews. I think probably a $1 billion tech company can too.
If you don't have security and privacy and basically anti-fraud mechanisms built in, it's really hard to do it later on retroactively. It's basically the levee is broken and now all the fraud is coming in. So you have to look at these platforms and you have to look at what incentives do they have to actually tackle this problem, 100%.
Fake reviews are inevitable. We shouldn't imagine a world with zero fake reviews. That's not really tenable. The question is, are the fake reviews leading to bad decisions in the marketplace?
When you see that the trust is deteriorating, it's very disappointing. The growth basically has completely outpaced the regulators and the government outlook. It is welcome to see the FTC and other congressmen actually looking at this problem deeply because it impacts a lot of consumers around the world.
The FTC requires people, if you've received a product or some other compensation to review it, you need to disclose that. And every once in a while, they'll sort of rabble their saber, but they've sort of been, to mix my metaphors, a paper tiger.
The tech companies enjoy immunity from liability due to outdated legislation, Section 230. And so we need Congress to start revising Section 230 to start holding the tech companies accountable for the fraud that they host on their sites.
Has it gone too far? Is it still appropriate? It's an important question as to whether you should really be able to host any sort of content and not have any sort of responsibility. This is the conundrum, and it's always easy to see things in hindsight. And one of the interesting things about the tech world, and one of the reasons why I think the Communication Decency Act in Section 230 was really a good thing at the start, is you don't want to necessarily stifle the development of a new marketplace. And so you don't want to necessarily hinder the early development of technology. So when sites like Yelp and Facebook and Amazon were developing, they weren't worrying about these problems of, say, non-consensual pornography or slanderous, libel, extortive kind of websites. They were thinking about growing as fast as they could. And technology critics such as myself and others, we might say, well, they should have been thinking about this earlier. And I think there is a lot of merit in that argument. But again, it's hard because that's not where the companies are focused. We don't really have the opportunity to go back and change the past. But again, as a technology critic, I would hope maybe now we can think about this a little bit more carefully when we think towards the future.
At this point, I look at Section 230 reform as really telling the public that Congress doesn't care about consumer reviews as a class of goods, that they're willing to just see that entire class evaporate because whatever reform they're willing to pursue is more valuable. Anytime a politician tells me that, mess with Section 230, I don't really care about what happens. What they're really saying is they don't care about the benefits we as a society have gotten from this increased competitive pressures that businesses feel that drive them to do a better job for consumers. And as someone who remembers what life was like before consumer reviews, I will tell you vendors work so much harder today to satisfy their customers than they used to in the old days. Because in the old days, if they screwed over a customer, well, that customer might tell some of their friends, create some bad word of mouth in their social network. But now the power of consumer reviews to be held accountable publicly has meant that businesses go above and beyond to try and satisfy their customers. I still think consumer reviews are essential to the overall well-functioning marketplace, that they solve an information problem that we need solved. We don't want to go back to relying only on professional reviews. We don't want to go back to relying upon word of mouth and idiosyncratic views from our friends.